Hello Internet and welcome to my new updated JavaScript tutorial. You guys have said, why don't you teach JavaScript by actually creating real JavaScript projects? And so in this tutorial series, I'm going to do just that. We're going to be using JavaScript as well as related JavaScript technologies. We'll use Bootstrap, Node, Express, React, Vue, MongoDB, and multiple other technologies. And in doing so, we will create real projects. Of course, they'll start off simple and eventually they will get quite complicated. And the very first thing I'm going to do is how to set up your environment so that you can follow along with this tutorial on both Windows as well as Mac OS. Alright, so on Windows, you're going to go to nodejs.org and click on this guy right here. The wizard's going to open up. You're going to click on Next a whole bunch of times after you accept licensing agreement. Leave absolutely everything exactly where it is, don't change anything, and click on Install. And after you do that, Node.js will be all set up, and click on Finish. After that, we're going to go to Visual Studio Code, visualstudio.com, and download. And since you're on Windows, click on this, and then come into the wizard, click on Next a whole bunch of times once again, and eventually it will all be set up. So click on Install and Finish. After you do that, Visual Studio Code is going to be available for you to start working with. What we're going to do is come over here and click on Open Folder, and then go and find a folder somewhere where you're going to have your first project and select it and click on Select Folder, and then Visual Studio Code will open. Now to run our code, what we're going to do is click on this guy over here, which is going to open up our extensions. We're going to type in Code Runner, and then right here where it says Code Runner, click on Install, and then it will be installed. What you're going to want to do then is inside your project window by clicking up here, you're going to come over here to this guy and click on New File. And then you're going to type in console log hello world like that. And then to run it, you're going to click on Control, Alt, and N. And you should see hello world down here, and everything should be working perfectly fine. And if you want to move this over to the right side of the screen, just right click here and then click on Move Panel Right. And everything's all set up. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is show you how to install everything on Mac OS. Alright, probably the easiest thing to do is to go to brew.sh and get homebrew. What you're going to do is you're going to select this whole entire line down here and copy it. Then you're going to go into your terminal, which is in your applications, the utilities folder, and you can just type in node-v to see if Node is installed, and it's probably going to come back that it isn't. You're going to paste in that homebrew code that you just copied. Then you're going to type in brew update and hit enter. Then you're going to type in brew install node, and a whole bunch of things are going to install. And then we got to get Visual Studio Code. So go to code.visualstudio.com, download, and then come over here to where we have our Mac install. Click on that, and that is going to download, and you will have Visual Studio Codes. You can just go and double click on that to open it up. And then you're going to come in here and click on Open Folder. You're going to go and find a folder that you want to go and install everything or have your whole entire project be inside of, and click on Open. And then you're going to come in here and create some new files and type in console log.helloworld, which is what we're going to run here in a second. You're going to click on the extensions button right here and then start typing in code. You specifically want Code Runner, so click on Install. Code Runner is going to install on your system. Then you're going to be able to just right-click inside of your code window and click on Run Code, and it's going to run just like you see right here. If you'd like to get this on the right side of your screen, just right-click down here and click on Move Panel Right, and boom, everything is all set up. Alright, so now I'm going to go in here and start creating some projects. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go and get Bootstrap, which is just going to make it very easy for us to create, pretty simple layouts or complicated layouts. And you just go to bootstrap.com, and then specifically we're looking for 4.3, and that's what we're going to be downloading. And what we need to do here is go and right here where you see this Bootstrap CDN, and you want to come in here and copy it. Just click on Copy over here. Then we're going to come in here and create 3 files. I created jstut.html and jstut.js and mainstyle.css. So we're just going to come in here, and this is just basic HTML code that we have right here. And we're going to paste in the linked Bootstrap right after title, right like that. Alright, so you have that all set up. You're going to have to go back to that website now and get a couple other things. You're going to paste those at the end of your body section in the HTML code, and all this code's available in the description underneath the video. So just come right inside of here, and right here, click on Copy once again, and this is going to give us JQuery and Popper and a couple other different guys. Jump back here, right at the end of body, and paste that in. There you can see is JQuery, and you can also see poppers right here. So we're going to save that, and that is our HTML. Now I'm going to make a couple changes, and make sure you put these changes after you put the Bootstrap in here, otherwise it might not take. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a link to our personal style sheet, and how you do that is just come in here and style sheet, and type is equal to, and this is a CSS file. And if you don't know CSS, I have tutorials on that as well. And I'm going to be, talking about everything I'm doing here though. So I call this main style.css, and then close that off. And we're also going to be linking to our JavaScript code that we're going to be writing here. And how you do that is you just go script. Once again, make sure everything's in the same folder, and source is equal to, and this is called jstut.js, and then go and close off your script tags. Now we come down here to actually creating our interface, and this interface is going to be very, very simple. It's not going to be some super complicated thing. So what am I going to do? Well, with Bootstrap, this is all Bootstrap related stuff. What I want to do here first is create a container that's going to put padding around all of my components. And how you do that is just go div, and class is equal to, and container, and that created that. And there we are. So now we're going to put all of our other components inside of it. Now I want to use something called Jumbotron, which is specific to Bootstrap, which is going to enlarge my fonts and put everything in a gray box, which I'm then going to change the colors on. And it just creates a nice little rounded box with rounded corners. And just make sure that Jumbotron is inside of a container. Otherwise, it will fill the entire screen instead of being self-contained. So how you create it is just go div, and once again, class is equal to Jumbotron, and there that is, and close that off. Now we need to go and throw some different components inside of here. I want to put a little heading at the very top of this, so I'm going to go and create an h3 tag, and I'm going to create a Lib Generator, which just goes and gets input from the user and goes and creates goofy stories. So I thought that would be a fun thing to do. Then inside of this, I want to go and start putting all my components inside of here. So I'm going to go form as class is equal to, and I'm going to use form inline. I'm using this because it is normally used whenever you want to display inputs on a horizontal row. I'm not sure if I necessarily want to do that, but I think it might work out. And I wouldn't be showing this video if it didn't. Okay, so now what I need to do is provide ways for the user to input information. So I need to create a whole bunch of inputs. So I'm going to go input type is going to be equal to, and this is going to be text, class is equal to, and I'm going to use form control here. And form control is just going to provide some default styling for both input as well as text area tags. So let's go and throw that in. And I'm going to need to be able to reference the data the user provides to me. Unlike a lot of JavaScript tutorials, this tutorial is going to be very browser based, like real JavaScript is, versus going and just having command line stuff. So I need to be able to get a hold of that. So I'm going to have this be input 0. And then I'm going to also have this be a person is what the value in the input is going to be, so that the user will know to create our Lib Generator. If you want to know what it looks like, just skip to the end of the video and look at it, and then come back here. All right, so they're going to be inputting a person's name, and I don't know if I'm going to put any spaces inside of there or not, but I have to create a whole bunch of these so that there are multiple different inputs the user can put. So another thing they're going to put inside of here is a noun, and just make sure you increment this by 1, and you'll see whenever we get into the JavaScript code why I have everything set up like this. It's going to make our code real nice and neat. And the next thing I want them to input is a verb, and increment this value once again. Throw that inside of there. They're going to input another verb and increment this again. And we're actually going to do this for a couple of these. They're all going to be verbs. Actually, we're going to have 2 more verb inputs. There those are, and then just increment this by 4 and increment this by 5. After that, we're going to switch it up and have them input a plural verb. So you're going to see what all this looks like, or otherwise look at the end of the video. So we're going to go plural verb, and then after that's going to be another verb, And then we're going to have them input an adjective. Again, increment these values. So this is going to be an adjective, and this is going to be a noun. Go and throw some more inside of here. And the next one is going to be an event, and increment these. And then we'll have another noun, and then we will go and change this to 10, 11, 12. Oh, no, I can just go like this. That was convenient. Then I will have them, after the event, import another noun and then a body part. And then the very last thing they will input is a noun. All right, so we got all of that set up. Then what I want to do is, of course, set it up. Well, I want to close my form off. And then I want to provide a couple buttons that they're going to click on, because I'm going to actually go and demonstrate how to calculate pi, how to create a Fibonacci list, as well as a Lib Generator, all in this one tutorial. So I'm going to throw in some break statements here, and then we will create a button. And Bootstrap comes with a whole bunch of built-in button styles. So let's just go and create a button and have it be type is going to be equal to a submit button. And here is where we're going to define our Bootstrap related styling. So I'm going to say that I want a large button to be generated for me. And then on click, this is how we go and tell JavaScript to execute certain code. I'm going to create an extremely simple one here. I'm going to first have it just come in and say hello, open up an alert box that says hello. And then we will go and create a more complicated one after that. And if you want to open up an alert box, that's how easy it is to do that. And it's not that much harder to go and do anything more complicated than that, as you're going to see here in a second. And the text on this button is just going to be hello. All right, so we got that. So that is the very first button we're going to create. And then we're going to go look at our interface here in a second. Another button that we're going to have here is to generate the values of pi. So I can pretty much keep everything the same, except right here, we're going to call a custom function that we are going to create. And it's going to be called calc pi. And we are going to send a big value inside of there, but I'll get to that in a second. And I'm going to name this button get pi. All right, so we got those set up, and I'm going to get all the HTML out of the way here right now. And we're also going to go and get a Fibonacci list. That's what we want to show on our screen. So I'm going to call this get fib list. And here we'll define how many values. So what do we want to call this? We'll just call this get fibs. And then we will go and create our Lib Generator. And we're going to name this button Lib Generate. And all that'll be the same, except this is going to be Lib Generator. And we will create that. And then what else? Oh, then after that, I'm going to create an output box area, which is going to be where all of our output's going to go to. So to do that, I'm going to create an input group that's going to allow me to output to our text area. So I'll go div class is equal to input group. And then inside of it, I'm going to go and add some styling that's going to put the word output. It's going to append it to a text area that I'm going to create, as you'll see in a second. So I'm going to go div and class is equal to and input and group prepend. And we're almost done with all of our HTML code. And then inside of this, I can go span class is equal to input group text. And this will be the text that gets prepended to the left side of our screen. And it's just going to be the word output. And then I have to go and create my actual text area. So right after that span is defined, I'm going to go and create a text area, and then we can go and look and see if we need to make any changes to our code here. And I'm going to call this output 1, and that's very important that that has an ID, because I'm going to reference that to dump information inside of it. I'm going to create 18 rows. That's going to define how big the text area is going to be. I might have to change that as well. Form control and text area, and I think I have everything set up. So now let's open that in a browser. And if I go and run it, you're going to see exactly what we have right here. And it doesn't actually look that bad, but I just wanted to do a couple little styling things in mainstyle.css so that we can go and, just see how that works. So let's say that I want to change the Jumbotron styling a little bit. So I'm going to go just Jumbotron. And let's say that I would like our background color to be like a purpley type of thing, RGB. And I'm going to say 37, 35, 124. And then just go and save that, reload it. Okay, well that's bad. So I'm going to go and also change the text to white so it's a little bit easier to see. And I'm mainly doing this just so that you guys can see it a little bit better. So save that. And that's going to change the text color. Doesn't look too bad. And then I can go text area. I want to style that up a little bit, mainly just to increase my font size. So I'm going to go text area. Whoops, I have to put a dot before that. Text area. And I'm going to have a height for 200 pixels. And overall, I want to set my HTML font size to a little bit bigger so that you guys can see it a little bit better. So see what this looks like. That didn't change it at all. Let's go and change it to 1.5. I just want to increase it just enough so it's a little bit easier for you guys to see, but not so big that it's, bad. All right, so I'll do that and reload it. And then bang, that messed that up a little bit. You know what? Let's just see what this looks like. It looks a little bit janky there, but in general, that's pretty much good enough. Maybe I should just leave it the way it was and zoom in if I have to. All right, got that. Yeah, that looks better. All the buttons are lined up. All right, so we have our basic interface all set up and a little bit of HTML or a little bit of CSS styling. Now what I need to do is jump into the JavaScript and go and make this work. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do here is we are going to figure out how to calculate pi using JavaScript. Now the formula for calculating pi is what you see on the screen. So basically we have 4 on top and we're first going to subtract, then we're going to add. You can see this is incremented by 2, so it goes from 1 to 3, 4 stays here, and we go negative plus negative. And we do this a lot of times. And if we do, we can calculate the value of pi. So what we need to do with our code is to go in and basically simulate that. And how we're going to do it is I'm not going to baby step it with you. I'm going to talk about functions. Now, a function is just a block of code that you give a name to, and that's it. So we go and define a function with function. And what are we doing? Well, we're calculating pi. So let's go and calculate it. And we're going to have to do this many times, many iterations of this calculation. So we are going to go and ask the user how many iterations we want. And this is basically a function. It's called calcpi, and all the code that lies between these two curly brackets, that's calcpi. So what are we going to do here? Well, one thing I want to cover is if you would want to create a constant value, that value would never change. You would just go const and pi value, for example, and 3.14159. All right, and that value can never be changed. Comments, by the way, start with double dashes like that, and then you can also do multi-line comments by just going like this. So this is a multi-line comment. All right, so then we don't need to waste our time with boring stuff though. Let's do something interesting. So the very first thing we want to do is we want to define these guys that are going to be changing here so we can calculate pi. And how you define a variable with JavaScript is with let. And I'll get more into the difference between var and let, but in this tutorial, I'm mainly going to use let over and over again. So I'm going to say that a variable with the name of pi is going to start with a value of 0. I can go and create multiple different variables on one line. So I'll have divisor, and that is going to start with a value of 1. Divisor is going to be this guy right here whenever we start writing our code. One thing that's important to know, however, whenever we are writing code and trying to create these great big giant numbers, is that JavaScript only has a precision up to 16 digits. So our value of pi is only going to have a maximum number of decimal places of 16. So we'll just keep that in mind as we continue writing our code. So what are we going to do? Well, we need to do this calculation, then this calculation, then this calculation over and over again. Well, of course, whenever we need to do something over and over again, we need a loop. And a for loop allows us to do that. So we're going to start off, basically, this is just going to be an incrementing for loop. It's going to perform a certain action a certain number of times. So we're going to just start at 0, and then we're going to say that we want to continue performing calculations based off of the number of iterations the user told us they want. And then I want to increment the value of I until we get to this number. And this is going to be a big number, like millions. All right, so we got our for loop all set up, and then we just have to model this guy right here in our code. How we'll do that is we'll go pi is equal to pi plus, it's going to start off with 0, and then we'll go 4 divided by the divisor. And then we go minus 4 divided by, and then I want to make sure the addition here, or increment by 2, takes place before our division. So we want to make sure we put brackets around that code. So we got that all set up. After that, we want to go and, of course, increment the value of our divisor. Now, I could either go divisor is equal to divisor plus 4, or I could go and save myself some time by just going in here like this, move that over there, and that like that, and that is exactly the same. And I'm just increasing that value so that I can go and continue to perform this calculation many millions of times. So I got that all set up, and that's all I need to do to perform this calculation multiple times. Now what I want to do is output to our browser, and I specifically want to output down here where it says output. Well, this guy down here is a text area. Where is it? And it is has the ID of output.1. So if I want to put a value inside of output.1, how I do that is I say documents and get element by ID, and then provide the name of said elements, which is going to be output1, just as we saw. And if I want to assign a value to it, I type in value, and then I assign that value. And I'm going to abbreviate my version of pi to 10 digits, and how you do that is go 2 fixed and 10. And there we go. And we just figured out how to calculate pi in this little tiny bit of code. So we save that, and we jump over here, and this is going to work because way up here, jstut.js is right there, and that's just like putting the JavaScript code in there. So we got that saved. Let's go and reload it. And let's click on, well, we can click on hello first, and you can see the alert pops up. But then we're going to go get pi, and you're going to see that it gives us a value of 0. Why is that? Well, I didn't tell it how many iterations or calculations to perform to calculate pi. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do that. And the bigger the number is, the more accurate the version of pi will be. And you can see here, calculate pi is right there. And I'm going to say that I'm going to put 1, and let's say that would be 1,000,000. Let's go and throw in 2 more digits. And let's save it and jump over here and reload it and go get pi. And it went and calculated pi for us. All right, so pretty neat thing. Now what I want to do is generate Fibonacci numbers. And basically, a Fibonacci sequence is like this. We're going to have a starting value, and then to get the next value, we're going to add that number plus the number that precedes it. Since there was nothing, it'll be 1. Then to get the next number, we add 1 plus 1 equals 2. And 1 plus 2 gives us 3. And then 2 plus 3 gives us 5. And that is what we're doing. All right, so let's go and make it happen. Very first thing I'm going to need to do here is create an array. And how you do that is like that. There you go. You just created an array. And basically, an array is just a value, a name that is assigned to multiple values. And what were we working with? We were working with multiple values right there. So that's basically what an array is. The very first part of the array is going to have the value of 1 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth and so on. So we have that all set up. That's our storage section for our Fibonacci sequence. Now, if you remember our HTML, this is the function name that we said we want to use. So we're going to copy that, jump back over inside of here, paste it inside of there. Of course, we have to put function in there to tell it it is a function. And then we need to go and create this. Now, it'd be very useful for them to tell us how many of these numbers they want to be generated. and I just said how many, so why don't I just call it how many? And there it is. All right, so what is this guy going to do? It's basically going to call another function to generate each of the individual values, and then what it's going to do is it's going to store those in an array and then output them over here to our output window. All right, so what are we going to do? We're generating a whole bunch of numbers. That means list. So we're going to say for, once again, I'm going to create, basically I'm going to create as many as it tells me to create. So I'm going to say how many, and I, like that, and then I am going to individually get those items and stick them into the cells in my array. And I'm going to call the function that is going to generate each of those individual values fib. All right, pretty simple. So let's close that off, and of course it's going to have to do some more, but let's go. We just said we want to create the Fibonacci numbers, so let's go and do that. So again, function and fib, and which number do you want to generate? Do you want the first one, the second one, the third one? What do you want? So there that is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create some values, because I got to generate. Remember, I'm going to have to add this to get this, and so forth and so on. So I'll have the first number, which is going to represent this one, and then the number 2 is that one, and so forth. So I will go and give them some default values. I'm going to start off with 1, because that's what that is, 1. And then, whoops, I'm going to go and define these all on separate lines. You can define them on separate lines, but I'm going to define them on single lines. 0, and then I'm also going to have a temporary value, which you're going to see here in a second, and I, which is going to be equal to 0. All right, so I have all this set up, and you can also go like this, and everything is fine. All right, so we got all those set up. Now let's figure out how to calculate each of the individual numbers. So I'm going to use a while loop, and a while loop's just going to execute code as long as this condition right here is true. So I'm going to say that while I is less than the number that I want to calculate, I'm going to continue calculating this. Now, there's actually an easier way of doing this, but it's a little bit more confusing, so I'm going to just stick with this. So what do I need to do? Well, I start off my value with 1, just as we saw up here. However, I want to go and calculate to be able to calculate the next values and next values. So I'm going to store the value that's currently in num1 in a temporary variable. And then I'm going to go num1 is going to be equal to num1 plus num2. And there that is. And then I'm going to go num2 is now going to get the value that was previously stored in temp. And then I'm going to increment the value of I, which of course is the same as saying I is equal to I plus 1. All right, that's just a shortcut. All right, so we got all of those set up. And then after I calculate it, I can say return number 2, which is going to be the value that is going to match up with this. So after I generate each of those values by repetitively calling that function over and over again, then what I'm going to want to do is output that information to the screen. So let's just go and copy this guy, because we're copying it to the same place. And right after our for loop, we're going to paste this inside here. There's an error coming, which I'll show you how to fix in a second, but I'm going to let the error happen first. And this, I'm just going to change. And what it'll end up being is fib list. And I want to go and get this array, and I want to separate all the individual values with commas and spaces. And how you do that, convert an array into a string, is one of the ways, is to use join. And then I can just go like this, put a comma like that, and save it, and that's going to work. However, jump over into the HTML, and I need to say how many of these numbers I specifically want to generate. Let's say I want to generate 20. That sounds fine. So let's just save it, and let's jump over here and reload it, and then click on Get Fibs. And you can see that it goes and generates all those values. If you can't see, there you go. The only problem is this 0 shouldn't be there. So what I want to do is knock that 0 off of the front of our array before I come in here and do this. How do I do that in JavaScript? Well, I just go fib and list and shift, and that will knock off the very first value in our array. Reload this, get fibs, and now you can see that it's gone. Now, if you would like to knock off the last value instead, you would just change this from shift to pop. And if you would like to go and knock off or go and eliminate a specific value inside of an array, you use something called splice. And then you're going to follow that up with whatever the index value is. And with arrays inside of JavaScript, they start at 0. So this would be the 0, 1, 2, 3. So if, let's say I wanted to knock off the 3 inside of there, for example, I just go splice, and then I would say 3. And then I would follow that up with 1, meaning I only want to get rid of the 3 and nothing afterwards. If I would type in 2, it would get rid of the 3 and the 5. But I don't want to do any of that. I want to go back to just running the shift so that my Fibonacci values are calculated. And that is how we do that. So now what I'm going to do is make our Lib Generator work. And I'm going to walk through the process of creating this whole entire thing. So what we're going to do here first is we're going to create a string of text that is going to be our little story we're going to tell. And everywhere you see this tilde is where we're going to take this information. So we have my dear old person, if they entered person, would be grandma, sat me down to hear some words of wisdom. This is going to put a new line inside of our text area. And then we're going to continue on and on and on, replacing these tildes with the values that the users entered over here before they click on Lib Generate. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Let's think through the process. So using comments, what I'm going to do is go and put down the logic I want to use. Very first thing, what I think would make sense is to take this great big giant long string and go and get each individual word and throw them inside of an array. And then I can just search for the array for the tilde and then go and put the input in there and then generate a string that will output on the screen. So what do we need to do that? Well, we need to convert our string, this guy up here, into an array. And I'm going to do my logic first, and then I'll go in and actually write the code. Then what I need to do is I need to have an array that's going to hold all of my user input. So I need to create array for user input. And then I'm going to have my main function. And what did we call it? We called it Lib Generator. So come over here, grab that. There we are. And then I want to go and I want to make it so that my functions are very readable. So I'm actually going to create the function right here. I'm going to say that I want to create an input array. So if you're reading this function, you should be able to understand precisely what's going on because everything is written very, very well. And I'm doing a whole bunch of function calls versus having gigantic lines of text everywhere. So after I do that, after I create my input array, which is just going to be getting these values, putting them in an array, then one thing I need to worry about is, did the user actually enter a value in each of these different boxes? Well, I need to check for that. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to say if check for missing input. And this is going to be a function that is going to find out if the user didn't enter input in there. And I can just cut to the chase right now. I know I can write a little bit of code. If they didn't enter something in each of the different input areas, I want to put an error message out on the screen. And that error message, I can just go like this, is just going to be enter all values above. That's it. There we are. So we got that all cleaned up. We got a little bit of code. All right, so that's our if statement. If this function returns true, then we're going to output this on the screen. Else, if this is not true, well, then we know that we're going to be able to go and create the text that's going to go in here. So I'm going to say else, and I'm going to keep this very simple again. Create madlib sentence. Whoops, sentence. Okay, so very readable once again. If I can spell sentence correct, like that and like that. And very modularized. So you could read this function as a person that doesn't even understand programming and pretty much understand what is going on. And whenever we're creating functions, that's what we want to do. So now what we're going to do is, let's jump up here because it's very easy to go and convert this string up here into an array. How we do that? We go let to create our array. And I'm going to call this madlib array. And to convert it, you just go ml text which is the name that I gave this, and then follow that with split, which is going to split everywhere there is a space. So my is going to go into one box, and there's the space. Deer is going to go in the next box, and so on and so on. And that's all we need to do to convert a string into an array. Then we need to create an array that's going to hold our user input. Well, that's very easy. Well, let's just call it input array is equal to, there we are, and it's done. All right, so that's out of the way. So now what I need to do is create all these functions that I referenced in the Lib Generator. So let's go and create them. So once again, what do we do when we want to create a function? We go function and create input array. There it is. And what do we want to do? Well, we need to check that each of these values has input inside of it. But they already have input inside of them, you say? Well, they have very specific input. The words person, noun, verb, plural verb. Nobody's going to enter those inside of there. So what I want to do is go and create an array that has all these default words inside of it, and then check our input array that the user, provided, to see if they contain any of those words. If they do, then I'm going to send an error message. Sounds like a nice, convenient way to solve that problem. So how do I check? Well, all of our input has I11, I10, and so forth. That makes it very easy to cycle through all of the input statements and to go and check for them to see if they're valid. So again, I just said cycle. What does that mean? That means I need to create a for loop. So let's go 0, and there's 14 total, but the very first index in the array is 0, so I'll have it like that, and 13, and I++. So there we created our loop. Then we're going to create our input array, so just go input array, there it is. And the first item in the 0 index is going to be equal to document get element by ID. And each of the individual IDs starts with the letter I and then is followed by a incrementing value, which is going to be I. I can then end that with a value, and that is going to get me each of the items that are stored inside of the HTML, starting with the very first one that starts with I0, gets each of those individual values and sticks them into my array. Very convenient. So we got that all set up, and that's all we need to do for create input array. So pretty nice stuff. All right, so now we need to check for missing input. So let's go and see if that works. And I already explained what that function is going to do. So we'll go check for missing input and let and default array values. And those are going to be all of these: person, noun, verb, plural verb, all of that stuff. So inside of brackets, I'll put all of those individual values. You can pause your screen there to type them in if you would like. And then what I need to do is just check the values from the input array versus these default values and see if there is a match. So how we can do that is, once again, we're searching through multiple values. So that means a for loop is going to be needed, is equal to 0. And then I'll go I and input array. And if you want to get the total number of elements that are inside of an array, use length to be able to get those out of there. And then I'll just increment this like that. And there that is. So what do I need to do then is check to see if input matches any of the defaults. And if there are no matches, what we're going to see in our output is a -1. So we'll just say if default array values and index of input array I is greater than -1, well, in that situation, I can say return true. So, and then guess what? Otherwise, well, I could do either an else there or not, or I could just do it outside of here. Let's just do it outside of here. Otherwise, false. All right, now I'll explain what this does. All right, so what it's going to do is it's saying if the default array values, these values that we defined here, these are things that are negative. We do not want them to be inside of our input array. So we're going to say if index of, and we're going to cycle through all the different values that are in the input array that the user provided. If they are greater than -1, if there is a match for one of these words inside of our input array, it's going to spit out a value that is greater than 1. So if it does do that, then I know that they missed input, that they did not input values into each of these things, so I can return the value of true. Otherwise, I return the value of false. And what happens if I return a true for check for missing input? Well, up here, check for missing input, that means we have to put an error message out on the screen that they need to enter all of the values. All right, so just think on that for a second. Kind of a neat little thing. Whoops, make sure this is right. There, input array. All right, so I might have a code error here. I'll fix it, of course. So we got that. Check for missing input is going to, in very succinctly, very few lines of code, going to be able to check to see if we have a valid input array created. So now what I want to do is I need to create my Mad Lib sentence. So I want to cycle through all of the words that are here, and every place there is a tilde, I want to pop out a value from our input array and stick it where the tilde is. So the name that I said I want this to be is create ML sentence. So let's go and copy that and create our function. So we'll say function create ML sentence, and it's not going to need any input, anything passed to it. So I'll say let array index be equal to 0. Then I'm going to say for I equal to 0, while I is less than our Mad Lib array length. Remember, I want to cycle through every single item that's in our array, which is going to be all of these words right here, as well as the tildes. So I'm cycling through each one of those guys. And of course, I need to increment the value of I each time through to get every single word. Then I'm going to say let match index equal to Mad Lib array index of, and I'm specifically looking for tildes so that I can go and replace said tildes. And then I'll go ML array match index equal to input array index. And then I need to increment the value or our index that we're working with here. So once again, let me review. What are we doing? We are cycling through every single word that is in here. And then what I'm doing is I'm saying if we have a match for a tilde, I want to find the index where we have a match. And then come down here. I want to go and replace where the tilde is with the very first value that is inside of our input array. So the user's input is going to replace all of those tildes. Okay, I think that makes sense. If at any time you guys have any questions, just ask me. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to go and output said information by joining all of the items in the array into our output window. So once again, we can just go to document. Let's just grab this. Oh no, don't get that one. Let's get this one. There we are. There's our output, and we will output this. So we'll go document get element output 1 value once again, and this is just going to be ML array followed with join, and then we're going to put spaces in because remember we took the spaces out. We didn't have the spaces in the array, and we will save that. All right, so we got that all set up. So we can save it and then test it. Okay, so let's test this guy out. So we got our Mad Lib Generator right here, and I'm just going to go in a person. I'm just going to put in dog instead, just to be different. If you didn't notice, I'm not really funny, so I'm going to just come in here and go monkey, and a final noun. Let's try egg. All right, so we have all those input inside of there, and let's run it and see what it does. Generate, and if we come down here, you're going to see my dear old dog sat me down to hear some words of wisdom. Give a man a monkey, and you run him for a day. Chase a man to screaming, and he'll cry forever. He who eats at the right time can fly again. Always wear angry chicken in case you're in a birthday. Don't use chicken to wipe your armpit. Always have a clean egg with you. All right, so there you go, guys. That is the first part of this JavaScript tutorial series. Hopefully you guys found it useful. And like always, please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.